Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 145 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I'm Gary, and I got my partner in crime, co-host, rolling partner, Byron Jabara with me today. How are you, Byron?
I'm doing good, Gary. How are you today?
I am doing fabulous. Can't complain.
Good.
Ready for another episode. And today we have an awesome one. As we talked about last week, we have an interview with the Raspberry Ape, Daniel Strauss. Do not miss the interview portion of this podcast.
Yeah. If there's any portion you do not miss in most of our podcasts, if not all, it's the interview portion.
You can definitely miss when Byron and I are talking, but do not miss when Daniel Strauss is talking. You'll actually learn something from him.
Yep. We try to, it's not just an interview show. We try to do like a show of things. You know, we have an article and a quote and an interview, and we play around a little bit at the end of the show and have some fun there as well. But definitely, as Gary always says, the meat and potatoes, and it is today, is located in the interview portion, which is the bulk of the show.
Yep. And we'd like to know how you'd like your potatoes. Mashed, baked, butter, sour cream. Just let us know, and we'll serve it up.
I guess by that definition, Gary, we are the potatoes. So,
potato.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, well.
Hey, just a heads up. I got an email from a listener, and he was asking about where are we in the Google Play Store, because I'd mentioned that we're now in the Google Play Store. We're not in the Google Play Store. We're in the Play Music. The Google has different stores, and they have one that says Play Music. There's all kinds of podcasts in there. So if you're an Android user and you don't have a podcast app that you already use, check out, go to the Play Music, search through their podcast for whatever you might like. We're in there. If you type in BJJ, we'll pop right up. But that's one way you could find us for us Android users like myself.
But, that was nice of you, Byron, to, just come out and admit you lied. So we really appreciate that.
Yep. Well, I don't find podcasts through the Google Play Music Store. I use a podcast app called Beyond Pod, and I think it's like $5.
With your ability to lie and tell fibs with a straight face and get people to believe it, you should be a politician.
Would you vote for me, Gary? Probably not. If I can't get
I'd
Gary,
vote for you.
Oh man,
there would be a armbar in every house, triangle, and a triangle strangulation in every city. So I'd definitely vote for you.
There you go. Hey, why is it not called a triangle choke to you, Gary?
Because it's not a choke, Byron. It's a strangulation.
What's a choke?
I am not cutting off the windpipe. I'm cutting off the carotid artery.
So
it's a strangulation.
I don't know. We had one article that I think taught us this, right? Was that what it was?
That was an article. That was true. Yep. So
choking,
I've been trying to call it a strangulation since then, just to see if I can make it catch on.
Oh yeah, it's hitting the world right now, Gary. Choking.
I think I'm the only one who says it.
I think you are too. Somebody said it in class the other day. I think they were kind of poking a jab at you, but you weren't even there. But like you could choke on food. That's choking. In jiu-jitsu, pretty much we're doing strangulation. So, but I don't know. I think it's easier just to say choke. But whatever, Gary. We'll make it work.
Yep. Potato. Choke,
however you want it cooked, we'll deliver your potatoes right here. And we'll continue to deliver your potatoes as long as we can keep this BJJ brick floating on that little raft that we made. And a lot of that raft is constricted of our audiobook sales. And especially if you're in your first year of BJJ, because we have an audiobook just for you, my friend. It's called Your First Year in BJJ. I'll be getting you through all the hurdles that you might run into your first year. Really trying to help you out, get this to be part of your lifestyle, get you past the many difficult things you might not even expect or know are there. And that way you can adopt this, and it will be not just a thing you do or a hobby. It'll be a part of your life and something that you could do for many years to come and become very good at. So definitely the first year of Jiu-Jitsu was a very tough one. And my goal is to get the audiobook to help you with that. It's $11.99. The money helps put some wood underneath that floating brick that we have and keep it going. And that way we can keep serving up these potatoes Gary's talking about.
Yeah, potato. Hey, also Byron's been telling me he's a little bit bored here lately. He says he's got some time on his hands, so he he requested that I say this here. But,
oh, boy.
Definitely send us an email at bjjbreak@gmail.com. Send us an email there. But Byron's question and answer there on YouTube, we haven't got any questions lately. So definitely send Byron a question. He said he's been getting a little bit bored and he needs to do another YouTube question and answer. So get one out to him this week, pretty please.
Actually, Gary, I've had a couple. We had
so you
one.
lied to me again? Yeah, I told you you're good at that.
We had one come out a little while ago, a question about confidence as a new student and how to get that. And then one after that I'm editing right now, which should be out before this interview or for this episode airs, talking about having teammates that aren't really that cooperative with your training. So just different topics. And if you have a topic like that you want me to talk about, send it my way, and I'll be happy to try to help you out. So as I get caught in all these, man, Gary, I've been caught in more and more weird situations here with you than in scrambles.
I'm beginning to tell me, than in scrambles. I like that analogy. A couple weeks ago, you actually said you were my friend, so I'm wondering if that's even true.
Oh, man. Keep your friends close and your enemies even podcasting.
Or keep your friends close, but your elbows closer.
There you go. Those are both good quotes. But, Gary, we got a different quote this week than those.
Oh, man. Nice segue there, Byron.
Thanks for calling me out on it, Gary. Speaking of a segue, I was just butchering it. No, but this quote, I don't know who said it. I couldn't figure that out. But somebody said this quote about changes. Small changes can make a big difference.
I think that was a quote by Caitlyn Jenner.
Caught me off guard on that one, Gary.
I'm in major trouble.
Oh, man. So as I get caught in the web of lies, Gary gets tangled up in his fascination with Caitlyn Jenner. That seems a bit unusual for his personality type. But small changes can make a big difference, whether you're Caitlyn Jenner or if you're just trying to make a little bit of a change in your life or a big change in your life. Say you're trying to lose 100 pounds. It starts by losing a little bit of weight this week, and really it starts by eating healthy today, or eating healthy and doing a little bit of exercise.
Yeah. You know, actually today when we were rolling this morning, somebody said I actually looked a little thinner, which especially I've been working out hard, trying to get bigger, muscular. But, you know, it's just a small change. He asked what I've been doing. I was like, the only thing I've changed is I stopped drinking pop. So, you know, that's just a small change, but it has made a difference.
Yeah.
You know, just little things, you know, little things with nutrition, little different ways you train, you know, even on the job, even when in your relationships, just a small change and it makes a world of difference.
Yep. And you can't do, well, maybe you could, but generally speaking, you're not going to do a small change one time and then go back to the way you were tomorrow. Make the change, keep the change. I mean, you're not trying to test out this idea. If you know something's good for you, make the change and keep it that way, even if it's a small one. It's like the idea of I'm going to eat, you know, the whole diet's going to be changed around completely, and I'm just going to be way healthier. Well, start to make your meals a little bit healthier. Start to change, maybe change a meal as opposed to everything. And then, okay, now that I got breakfast figured out, I'm not going to eat that anymore. You know, maybe I should look at lunch now, eating healthier lunches and eating healthier dinners maybe later on. But those small changes, they don't hurt as much, and they do add up. You know, if you cut out a 500-calorie breakfast and change it with a 200 and it's healthy, 300 calories a day, that's going to add up over the course of the month.
Well said, Byron. Well said.
Yep, and also, of course, with your Caitlyn Jenner thing, which pretty quick there, Gary. I'm impressed.
That was a little more than small changes, but
I don't know that to be sure.
I've never seen him in the shower, so I can't tell you, or she in the shower, so I can't tell you if it was a small change.
Definitely some kind of a change there, Gary.
Definitely.
Well, I would like to change topics. Where do you want to go next, Gary?
You know, hey, I found an awesome article here the other day on Jiu-Jitsu Times, which always has great articles, and we'll put a link to this article on the show notes. But it's by Chris Martin, and this is back from 2015, October 12, 2015. But it's called Samurai Businessman Destroys Competition by Training Employees in BJJ. You know, how cool would that be? You know, your company, your boss trains you in BJJ. That would be awesome. But it's actually real life at a company, IT company called GovSmart. Brett Lillard, who's the CEO of this multi-million-dollar company. This company was also named one of the fastest-growing businesses in Charlottesville, Virginia, 2 years in a row. But what I thought was funny is the author of the article, Chris Martin, was trying to interview this guy, and you've got a CEO of a company, and he couldn't get a hold of him, and he's trying and trying. But so one day, Chris Martin decides to become creative, figures out a way to get a hold of Mr. Lillard. So he calls the company, and he asks for Brett Lillard, and they're like, "Well, can I say who's calling?" And he said, "Hickson Gracie." He said he got some immediate laughter on the other end, and he got a quick call back from Brett Lillard. And Brett said that the creativity paid off, and that's how he got the call back.
Wow.
But, that's pretty smart right there. I was like, anybody, if you think Hickson Gracie's calling, you're going to call back.
So you've called me out for lying several times in this podcast, which have been more or less accidents, but that would be a type of a tactic that would probably work for me, because I try to hold somebody, hey, I want to try to interview for a podcast, my name is Byron. That doesn't really get you the door answered necessarily every time.
Because I can tell you, you being a black belt and me not, and so a lot of times I'm trying to get stuff done, and I'm making phone calls and this and that, and a lot of times I have to leave messages and I need them to call back, so I always use the name Byron Jabara. And the bad thing is, nobody calls me back. A couple of people have egged my house, and I'm not sure what it is, but it doesn't work for me. I think I'll try Hickson next time. Yeah,
Hickson would be the better route to go. So how does this jiu-jitsu affect the company?
Well, Mr. Lillard there, he's a purple belt under Pedro Sauer. He may be a brown at this point. He said he was soon to be a brown belt, since this was back in 2015. He's probably a brown now, or really close to it, but he's been training 10 years, so he had been training and he understood the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But they give a couple examples of BJJ's positive impact on the company, and one of them, formerly intimidated employees became more comfortable within the group, and the cockier alpha employers are humbled by the smaller, underestimated staff. And tell me that's not just like a regular day in your gym. And you think about it, jiu-jitsu, we've got these guys who don't look like they could fight their way out of a paper bag, but you get on the mat with them and you're going to be caught in triangular strangulations. You're going to be having your arm stretched out. You're going to get tapped left and right by these guys. And then a lot of times you get the bigger, muscular guys, and they haven't been training as long, and they somebody smaller humbles them, and you just become a group of everybody just respects everybody. The people who used to be intimidated now have a confidence, an inner confidence that they can just about do anything. And even the bigger guys, the more muscular guys, are you have respect for everybody that trains. So you're just like, man, this guy's a beast for showing up on the mat with us. But I thought that was one cool example.
Yeah, it's on the intimidated employees and the ones who were on the lower end of the confidence scale got moved up, and the ones that were cocky got moved down. So it kind of just evened out the playing field as far as that goes, which is probably very nice in a work environment. Also, you talk about the health benefits. He's got people dropping a lot of weight, and that just helps not only his employees be healthier, but also actually reduce the cost of healthcare.
He did say one guy lost 150 pounds and another 120 pounds. So, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then they also talked about how they've used their program as a team-building tool. They form a company bond that cannot be broken. Morale begets loyalty, and loyalty begets productivity. And you think about it. Think of all the people you train with. From the best to the worst in your gym. You have so much respect for each one of those people for getting on the mat with you, keeping you safe, pushing you to your limits. And I tell you, when you're sweating out there and you're competing one-on-one against, your training partner, and you guys are pushing and pulling, that's a bond. That's a really, really strong bond. A lot stronger of a bond than you can just get sitting in a cubicle, slinging, paper towels or, whatever you're selling there all day long.
That makes a great bond of us teammates, but in a work environment, being able to trust each other like that and being able to get that bond, people don't quit as often. People enjoy work. People see each other on an equal playing field, and it just sounds like it's worked out great for his company. I don't know if it's great for every company in the world. Clearly, there's some that haven't started doing this yet, but they probably will change here shortly. But it's a very interesting article, Gary. We'll put a link to it for sure.
Could you imagine those guys coming to your company to sell you their product, and the first guy comes up to you with some mangled ears, and you say no. Next time they bring in the purple belt, he's got a little more mangled ears, and he comes up and he's trying to sell you. Next guy comes in, the brown belt, even a little more mangled up, a black eye. He can't even shake your hands because he's got a permanent claw from gripping the gi, and you say no. And finally that black belt comes in. He just looks you right in that eye, and you're like, no way can I say no to this guy. So I'm just thinking that's a tough team right there.
Yeah. I know a bank like that here in town, Gary.
Oh, really? I've never heard of that one. But, can you imagine these guys at their company parties? And they're just talking about rolling, and, some guy's saying, hey, Billy over in accounting, he heel hooked Bill, he heel hooked John, and, hey, he's only a blue belt. He's not allowed to heel hook, or he's only an account executive, and account executives can't heel hooks. But I just think their conversations would be funny, and I think their break room would be awesome too.
Just the idea of company party. Think about how many jiu-jitsu get-togethers you've been to in company parties, and to me, I'm having more fun at the jiu-jitsu get-togethers. I don't really have company parties, but I might have a work party, and it's possibly, I don't know, that's that common bond that we all form on the mats, and we know so much about each other, and I don't know. A lot of places at work, they probably wouldn't even want to get together on the weekend and party because they see each other and they're tired of that all day long anyway. But if this company, they're probably happy to get together and like with your mat buddies and have a good time. So interesting concept, and I'm glad it's working great for them. And I'll see if I can get a hold of him for an episode, I guess, Gary.
Yeah. You imagine their resumes they get? Everybody's changing their resume right before they send it to them. Skills, BJJ purple belt, 4-time NAGA advanced champion. And you imagine some of the resumes they get, and I bet a lot of people are trying to go to work for that company that trains jiu-jitsu.
Or they could do their talent scouting on the mats at the local gym there.
They could set up a booth at the local tournament there trying to attract new employees.
There you go. A lot of options for that company.
Yep.
So that's a pretty cool article you found there, Gary. If you have an article that you have written or that you found, send it our way at bjjbrick@gmail.com. Definitely want to, if you're a listener and you have a blog, we definitely want to help you out, and we'd love to mention your article and put links to it as well. So send it our way, my friends. I think it is about time to get to our interview of the week, and we have Daniel Strauss. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
A group of scientists teamed up to study his competition videos. Einstein refused to continue research because of its destructive power. He once choked out an opponent using only his Wi-Fi connection. When he models for gi companies, he uses only his bad side. He only gets ringworm on his ring finger.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Daniel Strauss to the BJJ Brick Podcast. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, buddy, how you doing? It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm happy to have you. It's late over there where you are, and I'm happy you stayed up late. I guess this is normal for you to stay up this late, but I was telling you before we got started that I'd be in bed by now. So I really appreciate you on the show. Can you
it's pretty late over here.
It's a little past midnight over there. Could you kind of introduce yourself to the audience if they haven't heard from you yet or heard of you?
My name's Daniel Strauss. I'm 25 years old. I'm a Roger Gracie black belt, and I train and teach out of Mill Hill BJJ, which is in North London in the UK. I'm the English champion, British champion. I've won some NAGA stuff. I competed in the ADCC 2011, and just go around and do the whole jiu-jitsu thing.
And what got you started in jiu-jitsu?
So I guess it's the same story that a lot of people will say when you ask them how they got started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is I was interested in martial arts, and I kind of just went around and, from the age of about 10 or so, I went around and had a look at loads of different martial arts, did a bit of karate, did a bit of kickboxing, a bit of judo, a bit of JKD, Wing Chun, pretty much everything you could do. And I never really stuck with anything for more than a couple of months. And when I was about 14, 15 years old, I went to a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu academy. And at the time, we were doing strictly Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, but at the time, my now instructor, Nick Brooks, he had kind of just found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, but he just found Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was training at Rogers just when it opened up. And he didn't want to be anything to do with that Japanese Jiu-Jitsu side anymore. So I come to class and I'd do my, pre-rehearsed routines against non-resisting opponents, and then Nick and another black belt from my gym, Chris Hearn, would be in the corner rolling with each other. I remember saying, I said to the guys after class, what the hell are these guys doing? Because it looks really different from what we're doing. And they would say, this is some really advanced stuff. When you train for a couple of years, maybe you'll start learning a bit about the groundwork. And then I was training there for about 6 months or so, and the Japanese jiu-jitsu instructor ended up leaving, and Nick Brooks took over completely and started teaching groundwork. And I was like, well, this is very different from anything I've done, and I really enjoy it. And after a little while, he then turned it into a full Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy. So that's how I got into it. And I've been with Nick ever since I started, so I've had no other instructor apart from Nick. I'm very, very lucky that I managed to fall into a really high-level coach just to begin with. Not a lot of people do that.
Daniel, can you tell me a little bit about your off-the-mat training and things you compete in that aren't grappling related?
So kind of the one main thing that I do as well as grappling is I like to train physical, strength and conditioning sort of stuff. It kind of started out as just wanting to get stronger and bigger for grappling. When I started training, I was about 55, 60 kilos, which if I try and work out for you guys in pounds is around about 110, 120 pounds when I started jiu-jitsu, about 15, 16 years old. So I was a skinny kid. And so the appeal of lifting weights and getting stronger for jiu-jitsu was really appealing. I started doing that, and then I started getting more and more into it. I would still say now that I lift weights for jiu-jitsu, but I think if I stopped jiu-jitsu, for whatever reason I couldn't do jiu-jitsu, I'd definitely carry on lifting weights. I think after a certain amount of time, you get accustomed to being a little bit stronger, and you don't want to go back to not being so strong. So I'd probably continue doing that, even if I couldn't, God forbid I couldn't do jiu-jitsu. Keep it pretty simple. I do the basic strength stuff. I got into a bit more grips-related stuff. A lot of people know me for someone who likes to bend metal. I bend horseshoes and steel bars and tear decks of cards and stuff like that. That's another thing that I got into, that grip stuff to help with the jiu-jitsu, and obviously jiu-jitsu is huge grip, hugely grip related. So I got into it to do that, and then I thought, I kind of like bending these things. It feels pretty cool to grab a horseshoe and bend it in half. So I kind of started doing that, half to do with jiu-jitsu and half as a separate hobby, I guess.
What's the? I have no knowledge of this, like bending the horseshoes and nails and ripping decks of cards, stuff like that. What's the most difficult thing out of that category that you do?
Well, it's all different in different ways. So you have steel bending. There's lots of different categories. It's like a small subculture. It's really similar to jiu-jitsu actually, where you've got this small community who are actually completely crazy about bending steel. And that's all they talk about, just like jiu-jitsu guys. Jiu-jitsu is all they talk about. But yeah, we do a short bending, which is bending small, less than 6 or 7 inches pieces of steel, like nails and bars and stuff like that, and then you have the horseshoe bending, and it's different. It's tough in different ways. The misconception that a lot of people have is that it's just grip strength, which it isn't really. The grip is, or the wrist, I should say, is kind of the final link in the chain when you're putting power and putting energy into something like a steel bar or horseshoe. So if your wrists and your hands are weak, then you're not going to be able to exert the force that your body can create into that piece of metal. But it's an entire full body movement. When you're bending steel, there's a lot of chest involved, there's a lot of back involved. If you're doing it with some steel bending, you can do it with the legs, so there's a lot of legs involved. So it's a tough workout. If you have a horseshoe that takes 10 minutes to bend, you're really working it hard. You're going to be covered in sweat and feeling pretty pumped up and sore by the end of it. So I guess a couple of big horseshoes I bend, and probably one of the hardest thing. And then I actually got certified. So there's even a company that gives you a certificate for bending a particular piece of steel, which is the iMind Red Nail, it's called. And I was bending steel, and I thought, well, if I'm going to bend steel, I might as well try and go and do this hard piece of steel and get a certificate for it and say that I can bend that piece of steel. So January last year, you had to go to a judge, and they give you the piece of steel, and you've got to do it on video, and then they send the video off to the company in America, and they send you back a cool T-shirt and a certificate. So I did that in January. It was good fun.
Wow, I like you said a lot there, and I don't really know much about it, but your grips, your hands. If your hands can't handle what you want to do, it doesn't matter really how strong the rest of your body is. It needs to go through the weakest link. And I'm reminded of some guys will lift weights, and they put those wrist straps on to where they don't have to hold that weight with their hand. What do you think about those?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use the analogy that I use when I'm talking about that weakest link sort of thing. If you go into a gym and you can pull your back is strong enough and your body is strong enough to pull 200 kilos or 400 pounds or whatever weight you want to use, but then your grip gives out after 100 kilos or 200 pounds, then you can't pull what your back can pull. You're not strong enough to pull that 200 kilos. You're only strong enough to pull that 100 kilos. So if your grip gives out, you aren't strong enough. It's not like a lot of other sports where you can put your full body strength into something else, whatever, be it a football if you're kicking a football, be it a tennis ball if you're hitting a tennis ball with a racket, even boxes if you're punching. You don't have that sort of connection. You're throwing that punch and you're hitting someone with all that force. But suddenly when you turn to jiu-jitsu and you're grabbing and you're pulling and you're manipulating people with your arms and your body, if you don't have the strength in the lower arm, that weakest link, if you don't have the strength to transfer your body's energy into your opponent, then you don't have that bodily strength to begin with. So it really is really restrictive. Any people that train with me, if they're asking me for advice about training your grip, or even, to be honest with you, training in the gym in general, never ever use straps, because straps are just, even, but I want to be able to deadlift a couple, I could deadlift 30 more kilos if I don't use my grip. Forget about it. If you're powerlifting, that's fine. If you're doing jiu-jitsu, do it with your hands. If your hands can't hold it, you're not strong enough to hold it. And to be honest, you can even take it the other way and say, not only am I not going to use straps to help my grip, I'm actually only going to lift with a thick-handled barbell or thick-handled dumbbells, and actually make it even harder instead of making it easier. So then you know that your grip will be the last thing to give out in any part of your body. And if you have the confidence that however strong you are or however strong your opponent is, that the last thing that you're going to lose is that end link between you and your opponent, then that's a good skill and a good attribute to go into a sparring or go into a match with.
And it is a nightmare to grapple with somebody whose grip you just can't break. And it seems like, in my experience, I get used to the grip strength of the typical person I grapple with, and occasionally I'll run into somebody and I'm just blown away, and it's frustrating, it's hard to deal with, and it just throws my game off because I can't even start to break their grips. So that's a great advice on grip training and that sort of thing. Can you maybe describe your style of jiu-jitsu, what you like to play and what you like to do?
My style of jiu-jitsu is it's I'm about 95 kilos, which is around about 200 and around about 200 pounds at the moment. So I'm quite heavy, but I started jiu-jitsu when I was, like I said, 120, 130 pounds. And one of what I feel is one of the biggest advantages I have is that I developed a style for a small grappler when I started training, and that I was able to keep some of, at the very least, that same style, that movement, and that guard game and the back takes and stuff like that. I could keep that and then put the size and the strength behind it and kind of have a small guy, a relatively small guy's game in a relatively bigger guy's body. So I like to play, I do like to get past side control and put some pressure on and be a nasty bastard from on top. Everyone likes doing that. If anyone says that they don't want to get in side control and crush a guy, then they're lying. But I really, really like playing off of my back. Especially no-gi, I really like playing the butterfly guard position. I think it's absolutely the best position in no-gi grappling. I think that the butterfly guard is absolutely the best position. I like looking to attack the back. I'm very, very submission orientated with my grappling. I think that not just threatening and forcing a person to be on the defensive the entire time is hugely advantageous, but also using a lot of submission. People look at a lot of the holds that you get when you're attacking submissions, and they think that they're only useful to try and submit your opponent with. So you've got stuff that, as well as being a possible submission, gives you a huge amount of control over your opponent, both physically, anatomically, and also the fact that they're more worried about you attacking that than whatever else you're doing when it comes to transition and positions. So, for example, the two biggest examples that I use, and the two things that I use in my game hugely, are the guillotine and the Kimura grip. Both of these things, if I say those words, you're thinking submission. But actually, when you say those words to me, I'm thinking control and positions and transitions as much, if not more so, than the submission. If someone's grabbing the guillotine and the only thing that they can do from there is try and choke the person out, and if they can't choke and they let go of it, then you're hugely underusing a really, really great position such as the guillotine. With the guillotine, you can sweep. With the guillotine, you can use to pass the guard. You can transition. You can control. So I try and use that in my style of grappling. I try and use positions that I can submit from, but also use them to transition and help me move around as well.
Yeah, well said. That's you said a lot there. Taking it in here, you mentioned the butterfly guard being such a great position for no-gi grappling. I couldn't agree more. It's so great that you could just instantly be in that great position. It doesn't the back is a great place to be. So is the mount, but getting there could be next to impossible with many opponents. But the butterfly guard. You want to be butterfly guard? There you go. You're in butterfly guard. It's really such a quick way to get to such a great position. Can you just maybe touch a little bit more onto why you like butterfly guard so much?
Yeah, so kind of, it's a really, really good point. It's a really, really simple position to get into. You can literally just, if there's a bit of distance between you and your opponent, you can scoot in a little bit. The inside hooks start coming, especially if the guy's standing. You start playing open guard with the legs on the inside, and if you can start manipulating the person and forcing him off his base, and then as soon as he drops down to one knee, or as soon as he drops down to two knees, bang, he's right there in front of you in the butterfly guard position. And this helps even more if you have good hip mobility. If you have good hip mobility and the ability to snake out. So I'm really inflexible. I've got the tightest hamstrings of almost anyone you're ever going to see, but I've got relatively mobile hips. So I don't think that you need crazy hamstring or groin flexibility, especially, well, for my style, I definitely don't need it. But the hip mobility and the ability to bring one hook in to go from something like a half guard or even from side control, bringing that shin on the inside immediately puts you from a defensive position such as underneath side control immediately into an attacking position like a butterfly guard. And then one of the huge advantages of that is a lot of the time that a person's, say, going to have an underhook on you when he's on top in side control, or have an underhook on you when he's on top in half guard. These are positions that your opponent's going to look to take. But as soon as that hook comes in, and as soon as you can transition from these positions into the butterfly guard, suddenly the underhook that he had on you is one of the worst things that he can do, and you can pull that arm in, use it to sweep, use it to set up other submissions. So the butterfly guard is a hugely versatile position. The big difference, we're talking, we're saying the butterfly guard is really, really effective no-gi. It is effective in the gi, but the big difference between the two is the ability to draw someone into you in the gi. So in the gi, if we get into the butterfly guard, I can grab onto your lapel and I can pull you straight into a closed guard. And once we're in closed guard, I can pull you down with the lapel or wrap the lapel round and get into very, very tight positions and really control your posture. But if you're in closed guard no gi, one, very, very difficult to get into closed guard no gi because you don't have the ability to close that final little bit of distance that you need to do to get your feet around. And then as well as that, you also have the person who you're trying to get guard on, the person who's on top, they know how difficult it is to open the guard. So they're going to be even more aggressively trying to defend you from getting that guard locked around them, which makes it very, very difficult. Most people who train, who spar no gi or train no gi will know how difficult it is, A, to get into the closed guard, properly lock a closed guard on someone, and then B, also do anything from closed guard. If an opponent wants to stall from closed guard, it's one of the most frustrating positions that someone can be if they don't want to do anything. Unlike in the gi, you can set up a lot of stuff with the lapels and you can move around a lot more with that controlling the posture. So whereas I would say the closed guard is probably the best position you can be in off your back in the gi, I actually think that the butterfly guard is a much, much better position to be off your back on if you want to sweep or attack no-gi, and that's because you don't have the ability to pull them in with the lapel, so you're using the legs to push them away and using your upper body to kind of manipulate their upper body. It's a much better position.
So nice comparison there between the gi and no-gi. Which one do you prefer most?
This it's a question I get a lot. It's a question I don't get that much, to be honest with you. Most people assume that I'm just a no-gi grappler. Yeah. Well, the first thing is that I don't just train no-gi. That's the most important thing to say. I train gi as much as I train no-gi. To be honest with you, a lot of the time I train gi more than I train no-gi. There are more gi classes at my academy, and I enjoy training in the gi. However, I haven't fought in the gi for a long time. It just kind of organically happened that way, that my style suited no-gi a little bit better. So even though early on in my training, back when I was 16, 17 years old, talking 7, 8, 9 years ago, I was training probably 90% in the gi, 10% no-gi, but then I'd go to gi and no-gi competitions and I'd do much better in the no-gi competitions than I would do in the gi. So maybe I'd get a bronze in the gi and I'd get a silver or gold no-gi. And because of that, it's sort of happening that people started to view me more as a no-gi specialist, even though I was training much less no-gi than I was gi. And then it kind of got more and more. The better I did no-gi, the more people wanted me to fight this certain tournament no-gi. And then the better I did there, the more people wanted me to teach no-gi. And it kind of worked out where I was viewed as the no-gi guy. I'm definitely not just a no-gi guy. I'm a black belt in the gi, and I train gi just as much, unless I'm training for a no-gi fight or tournament. I train in the gi as much, if not more, than I do no-gi. But I just so happen to be a little bit more successful, and I fight a little bit more no-gi. And then at Mill Hill BJJ, where I teach, I'm the head no-gi instructor, and I teach all the no-gi classes, and we have a couple of other guys teaching the gi classes. But yeah, I like them both. There's definitely advantages to the two of them. I think every time I train a big stint of no-gi and then I put the gi back on, I have improvements from my gi game, and then vice versa. When I train in the gi for a while and I take the gi off and I train no gi again, I feel improvements. So it definitely helps each other.
Daniel, if you have a big no gi tournament or match coming up, when and do you totally put the gi away and just train no gi? And is it a month out, or a week out, or 6 months away from that, or when do you make a change to what you're doing?
I'd probably start adapting my training at roughly the 2-month mark, I would say, 8 weeks out. And then I'd probably reduce my gi training to maybe once a week. I try and keep it in there a little bit, so it's not too brutal when I start training gi again and my fingers really hurt and everyone's holding on to me and I can't move how I want to move. So I try and keep it at least once a week if I can. Even when for example, when I was training for Polaris, I was still trying to put the gi on at least once a week. So I think that's a good compromise. And vice versa, if I do compete in the gi again, I'll try and train at least one time, no gi a week as well. You've got to keep yourself sharp with on both sides of the sword.
It sounds good. You mentioned briefly about the culture of strongman and competing in that. Could you maybe compare, for good or for bad, the two cultures of jiu-jitsu and strongman?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say that I'm in the sort of strongman community, but I do know people who are.
Yeah.
The gym that I train at in not the jiu-jitsu gym, but the gym that I lift at, which is called Villain Barbell Club, which is in North London as well, just around the corner from where I train jiu-jitsu, so it's really convenient. But the guys and girls at Villain Barbell Club, we have a really, really strong man and strong woman team. We have some of the strongest women in the country and some really, really strong dudes there. So I've kind of been able to see into that community, and it's very, very similar to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene. And I think the way that it's similar and the reason it's similar is because it's very it's a lifestyle. If you do something that doesn't involve too much of your time, effort, commitment, then you never really get drawn too far into it. Obviously, anything you do, you can put 100% into, but stuff like jiu-jitsu, very rarely do you have someone who doesn't really care too much and just drops in and out. They either don't do it anymore, or they suddenly can't stop thinking about jiu-jitsu. They want to train every day. They plan their holidays around jiu-jitsu. As soon as you get into jiu-jitsu, that's all you want to do and that's all you think about. And pretty much everyone I know had a very similar experience. And I think it's very similar to something like strongman or even like still bending and stuff like that. It becomes a kind of ingrained into your lifestyle. You eat differently, you sleep differently, you're very conscious of what you're doing. And because of that, because it's a lifestyle choice, I would say, and also because it's a very small community, because it's such a niche sport. We think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is huge, and yes, it is getting much, much bigger, but it's still a tiny sport compared to, football over here, or soccer to you, or American football, baseball, something to you guys like that. It's still a really small sport. So because of that, it's quite close-knit. If you're walking down the street and you see someone with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu t-shirt on, you go, you give the guy a nod, or you ask him where he trains. I've seen a couple of times, I've seen a guy with a jiu-jitsu t-shirt on. I'll be like, whoa, we're pretty much family. We do the same sport. I go over there, ask him where he trains, and all of that. And it's the same sort of thing in those sort of communities within the strength game, powerlifters and strongmen as well. I think they have that same connection from being very much a lifestyle sport, and then also being a very small niche sport where you feel like you're kind of family, because there's only, there's not very many of us doing this. We've got to stick together sort of feeling that you have with it.
Yeah, I'm always interested in the different cultures of sports and activities, and that's neat to hear. You have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so I have a podcast out. It's been out for 3 weeks now. I've just done 3 episodes so far. It's called the Raspberry Ape Podcast. And yeah, I just thought I only recently got into listening to podcasts. I do a lot of driving around, doing seminars and teaching and stuff like that. And then I've got a dog, so I walk my dog every day as well. And I got a bit bored listening to music all the time, and I thought, I'm going to try this whole podcast thing. I've never listened to a podcast before. I thought I'd try this whole podcast thing. And then suddenly I realized there's so many goddamn podcasts and there's so many really, really cool ones. And I end up driving longer or sitting in my car once I get to the destination. I end up taking my dog for 2-3 walks a day to try and listen to more of the podcasts. And I thought there wasn't very many UK-based jiu-jitsu podcasts, and I thought, why not I just start one myself. I wanted to make a podcast that I would listen to, the one that, the sort of thing that I would want to listen to. That's what I try and do when I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I want to be taught in the way that I wish I was taught, or the way that I could, sort of do it the way that I would want it. So I tried to make a podcast like that, with that sort of style that I'd enjoy, talk to interesting people, talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, talk about other stuff. I've got the first episode is about strength and conditioning with my strength and conditioning coach at Villain Barbell. The second episode is with a guy that I've done some mental performance training with, which is something that I think is hugely overlooked in all sports, but especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where it's in that very early stages, and because it's an amateur sport, there's not as much money in it, so people don't act as professionally. So both those subjects, both the strength and conditioning and also the mental performance side, get overlooked a little bit in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world, I think. And then the third episode, I sit down with a guy called Simon Hayes, who's a big star in the UK. He was there from the beginning of the birth of UK Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's got some really cool stories. He's a sound engineer who's won an Oscar, worked all over the world on really cool films, and trained with some really cool guys. So yeah, I just like sitting down and basically talking to people. I guess you probably got the same, considering you're doing the exact same thing. It's just nice to chat to guys who are similar to you and hear cool stories. I sit down with people that I've known for like 10 years, and then I learn things within 5 minutes that I had no idea about them. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and hopefully I can continue to get cool guests on and talk about interesting stuff.
Absolutely. What are your plans for the future with this? Do you have anything coming up?
I'm recording another episode tomorrow. I'm trying to get out one. I'm trying to get them out once a week. I'm just looking for it. I've got a list of people that I'm trying to go through, but I'm just looking for interesting people to get in and have a chat. Basically, that's how these things work. I think I'm a bit of an amateur when it comes to it, so I'm kind of just I'm winging it, to be honest.
You're doing
which
good.
I think is the best. Yeah, I think it's the best way to do something. Sometimes you just got to get out there and learn on the job.
That's how we learn jiu-jitsu as well. You get out there your first time, and it's a little different, and then you get better and better and better. And I think you're doing great already. I've listened to your podcast. I recommend it to the audience. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Everyone go check it out. Daniel, I want to know.
Thank you, dude.
Absolutely. If you could think back of when you got your black belt, and maybe something that you've learned since then that you didn't really know or realize before that point.
So I got my black belt. It's coming up to 2 years ago now, I think, which is crazy and terrifying. I would definitely have to say the biggest thing that I learned since getting my black belt is that it's completely irrelevant. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we put this expectation where, and this doesn't just apply to the black belt. This applies to every single belt you get. You expect to work up to a belt, and then when you get that belt tied around your waist, suddenly I don't know what people expect. Either they suddenly get a boost of energy, and or they have a spiritual awakening, or you get the purple belt tied around your waist, and when everyone else has left class, you get taken to a secret room that only the purple belts and above know, and they show you all the extra techniques, and you just go, oh, all of this stuff that I've been missing the whole time, I'm now open to this whole new world. And then you go and get your belt, and you realize that you wake up the next day and you're no better than you were the day before, and you've just got to keep on training like you know, like nothing happened. And that's the thing, really. It's just it's a step in the progress. It's kind of just like a marker of where you are, but it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't suddenly make you better at jiu-jitsu. If you suddenly stop, you have so many people who work really hard to get a blue belt and then stop training. Well, then you're not going to be as good as you were when you were just before you got your blue belt when you're a white belt. Just because you're tying a blue belt around your waist now doesn't mean that you're still going to be better than all the white belts. So I think that's the one thing that you learn. Everyone learns when they get given any grade, but obviously the black belt is the big grade that you expect. Now I'm a black belt and I'm an expert, and then you realize, well, you just got to come in and you got to train, and sometimes you have good days and sometimes you have bad days, and sometimes you feel like a badass black belt, and sometimes you want to take your black belt off and put a nice shiny white belt on and just jump in with the rest of the class. So I definitely think that's the one thing that I would have learned from getting it.
Well said, and it's that's advice you could take. Like you said, it happens at every belt. It seems like, anytime you get a new belt, just kind of take that with a grain of salt, and it's not going to change your world. That way, maybe it'll cushion some of the disappointment you might have in the next coming days or so after you get that new belt. Yeah,
or I'm lying to everyone, and actually there is a secret room that you get when you get your black belt, and suddenly everything makes perfect sense, and you're a master now.
One
you
of
just
the
have
two.
to find out, I guess.
We'll let the audience decide on that one, which one's more likely.
Exactly, yeah, they can decide.
Daniel, you mentioned that you really are interested in the mental side of training and competing and things like that. What do you do before you step on the mat to compete? So it's about 20 minutes out. You're gonna be competing with somebody in a short time. What are you doing to get ready?
So what I've done, and I talk about this on the second episode of the podcast that that we were talking about earlier. What I've done is I've developed a trigger that I can set and I can turn on that puts me into what I believe is the optimal state for me to compete in. And what that allows me to do is I don't get nervous really before I compete, because me personally, the person talking to you now, does not fight, does not compete in jiu-jitsu. There's another person, and I can draw him out and I can put him in the driver's seat and I can have him compete. And therefore I don't need to get nervous at all because I'm not doing anything. And so it's about 20 minutes out, like you said. I begin to warm up, and then I decide that it's time for me to step out of the driver's seat, and I do my trigger, and this other person steps in, and I've trained that. So as soon as I hit that trigger, I immediately go to the optimal state. And the optimal state for kind of that, it's all about the optimal state of arousal. Some people compete very well or compete at their best when they're very, very relaxed, and they're very mentally clear. They've got excellent clarity. They can see everything. They're very aware, and they're relaxed, and they can play their flowing game or whatever. Other people are very intense people, and if they relax too much, they're going to not be fast enough, and they're going to be sluggish and slow, and they need to really hype themselves up a bit. And you can see a big difference if you take a guy like the Meow Brothers, who are very relaxed when they step on, or then you take a guy like Rodolfo Vieira, who's very intense when he steps on, and you'll see it. Guys like Terrere slapping himself before he goes on to the match. These are people that compete at elite level, and the way that they get into their zone is by raising that arousal level up quite high, and that's where they had to compete. Everyone has a different state, an optimal state of arousal, and by having this trigger, it's like a preference setting on your car seat. So I can flick this preference setting, and it goes into pretty much goes into the optimal state that I want to compete in, and then bang, I'm ready to go. And the more I compete, the more this drills in. I've been doing this for about 4 years now. So the more I compete, every time I do it, it reinforces that state that I'm in and allows me to get more confidence in the ability to step into that. So once I hit that, it's a physical cue and a mental word. Once I hit that, I'm ready to go, and then I do a bit of a warm up. I get out there and just get ready to tear it up.
Okay, the optimal state of arousal. You gave some examples of both high level competitors. Some come in relaxed, some come in intense. Is that more based on their game and what they're going to be doing, or is that more based on their personality and how they're going to address things on the mat? What determines what kind of a arousal you need to have to do well?
I think it's absolutely both. Some people can be have a very aggressive game and be very intense with their movement, but very calm and relaxed in their mind. I think there's a saying which is steady haste. You need to be, ready to go get something, but also not get too crazy that I've made the mistake of getting too excited, too hyped up before a match, and you get tunnel vision and your adrenaline's too high and you gas really fast and you can't focus and you forget what you're doing and you're slow. So there are people who can play an intense game whilst being relaxed. And there are absolutely people who can play a relaxed game whilst being very quite intense. So generally, the more intense people and the more excited people and sort of like that, generally they're going to play a more aggressive game, and the more relaxed people are going to play a more relaxed game. But I think that's more to do with their. I think that your style of jiu-jitsu is an expression of your own psyche and your own mentality and your own emotional state and how you perform. So I think that the people who are more relaxed as a person are going to perform better when they're relaxed, and they're going to have a more relaxed game. So I don't think that necessarily they're connected through that way. I think it's more the people who are intense people have intense games. The people who are relaxed people have relaxed games. There is some crossover, but as a general rule, I think that the jiu-jitsu style is a direct expression of that person's individuality.
It's very interesting. You mentioned about developing a trigger, and I'm trying to take notes here as we're going, but I can't. I'm not the fastest writer in the world. You said there's a physical cue and a verbal cue. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a physical cue, like an action. There's an internal, a word I say to myself. I can't tell you that because then if you say it to me, then I'll just lose my mind and flip a car or something like that. And then there's some visualization as well. But the idea behind all of this, it's kind of irrelevant. That's the style, and that's the way that I was taught by Alan Whitten of Fighter's Mind. That's how he taught me to do it. There are, people can do it with just a physical cue. People can do it with just an internal verbal cue. But I think if you have a couple together, then it strengthens it and it makes it more kind of ritualistic. When you have a ritual that's very repeatable and very unique, and then a combination of lots of different things that all add into this one thing, it's a little bit more powerful.
And how are you developing this? Do you only do it when you compete, or are you doing it before a hard training session to get your get in that right state of mind, or how is this worked on? Yeah.
So the original way that I developed it, obviously you can't develop it to begin with in competition because it's way too chaotic. It's like practicing a brand new technique for the first time. You watch or someone shows you a technique and then you go and try it for the first time in a competition. It won't work. So you have to drill it in the exact same way that you would drill a technique in class. So I worked with Alan, and he what he tried to do is, using visualization, get me into the state that I, kind of draw me, even though I wasn't about to fight, mentally get me into the state that I wanted to be in, visualize who I wanted to be, how I wanted to act when I'm working, when I'm in the zone and when I'm on form. And then when I'm in that form, remember it, lock it in, and then hit the cues and kind of say almost, that's the image, save the image, and remember it, and then relax, come out of it, do that a couple of times, and then continue to do that. And you can kind of drill that in the same way you drill an armbar. You can drill getting into that performance state and then relaxing out of it. And then obviously the real test in the same way. You can drill your armbar 100 times in class. You can catch 20 guys in the gym with it. But then when you go into competition and you hit your armbar on the mats in competition, that's when you've really got it. So it's the same sort of thing with that psychological trigger and cue. Once you start hitting in the competition and it's working for you, then you know that it's really fixed in and it's honed.
Well, that's a cool thing to develop, and I'm going to look more into that. And I think that's really really valuable tool that you could use. I'm going to be
and just 1 second. You mentioned do I do it before training? I don't do it before training. Because, to be honest with you, the state mentally that I perform in when I'm in competition is too high and too intense just for the gym stuff. I've built a separate cue that I use, which is a little bit lower down, which I use in training as well, which actually is kind of the opposite. Instead of trying to, hype me up too much, I have another cue which is trying to relax me. And if I get, sometimes we get frustrated when we're training, and especially if you're a big, strong guy, which, to a degree I'm stronger than some of the people that I'm rolling with, you can have a habit of, if you get frustrated, going a little bit crazy and muscling stuff and getting aggressive like that. And if you allow yourself to get into that state where you're using a little bit too much strength, as we all know, if you're using a lot of strength, you're not developing your jiu-jitsu. So I have a trigger also, with the same sort of principles. I have a trigger to actually relax me and bring me back down to, okay, it's time to be good and technical and still aggressive and still submission hungry, but let's bring it back and let's focus on the technique and stuff like that. So that it kind of works both ways.
Daniel, would it be possible to develop a trigger like this that you could actually trigger during a match to where you're grappling a guy, 5 minutes goes into it, they kind of get the feel for what you're going to be bringing them, and then you trigger it, and then it's like a different person, and you just like surprise somebody a little bit about what you're doing instead. Is that even possible, or does it have to take something? You have to be off the mat really to be able to perform this sort of a trigger.
No, absolutely, 100%. I'm no expert on this matter, but I think the mind is an incredibly powerful tool. One that even the greatest mental performance experts and the greatest psychologists and all of that still don't have a tiny grasp of. The brain is incredibly powerful. 100%, you could build even using the strategies that I use. As I think that I use a very low level of everything that's out there. But even using those strategies, absolutely, you could have a trigger that could change your performance state during a match. And I think that there are, if you watch some high-level guys, if you move into a sport that is very closely linked with ours, but is more professional, like MMA, I think there are guys that are doing these sort of things. There are guys that are working with mental performance coaches. There are certain guys that you see doing certain triggers. And then also you have stuff, not on purpose, but kind of for the same objective. So you have guys who, let's say, at the beginning of the fifth round, Nick Diaz comes out and he's screaming and he's shouting, he's hyping the crowd up. In a way, that is kind of, even though he hasn't trained it and it may not be on purpose, that could be a mental performance cue, which is actually, if you get hyped up and psyched up like that, you actually feel stronger. And if your mind feels you're stronger, you are physically stronger. It is that powerful. If you're tired and then suddenly you get, come on, let's go, let's do this. Suddenly you actually feel more energy. So the guys who are coming out in rounds and shouting at the crowd and psyching themselves up and screaming and stuff like that, that is in a way a mental performance cue trigger that is then bringing them to the next level. Absolutely, if you worked on it and you were smart about it, you could create cues that you could switch on. You're 5 minutes into a match, you've gone in there with a relaxed strategy, and you've got a cue that means there's 3 minutes left, I'm down on points, I've got to do something. You could hit that trigger, absolutely. The trigger that I use in training, I do whilst I'm rolling sometimes, during a round. The trigger that I do for competition, I always do just before, a little bit before the match, and then immediately stepping onto the mat, I do it as well, a follow-up one. So yeah, you could definitely develop something that could kind of, for lack of a better word, and I kind of hate this phrase, but to initiate beast mode, if you wanted to call it that. I find it a really, really cringy phrase, but if you wanted to call it that, you could do that if you wanted to during the fight, yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm fascinated by this whole idea. The closest thing I have to this is when somebody's maybe passing my guard and I catch a knee to the head or something like that, a really hard knee. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to get out of here. That's the best I have as a trigger. So I prefer maybe my trigger wasn't a knee to the head and something that I could just do in my brain or something that would be a little bit easier on myself. But that's just a fascinating topic I need to learn more about, and definitely recommend.
It's a really, really interesting subject. The mind is such a powerful tool. It's so underutilized by all of humanity. Absolutely, it's really, really. It's still. We still understand collectively as humans so little about the mind and the brain, and even the people who know what they're doing. Within that, very few people take advantage of the stuff that we do know. So I find it a hugely fascinating subject. I still want to do more research. Even though I feel like I've got to a certain stage, this is the whole thing with training. You should never feel like you've completed jiu-jitsu just because you've got your black belt. You should never feel like you've completed strength training just because you bench 150 kilos, 300 pounds. In the same way, you shouldn't feel like you've completed mental performance or mental preparation just because you've had a couple of good fights where you've been in the zone. So even me, who already do more than a lot of people do when it comes to this stuff, I'm still looking to improve myself and work with Alan more and try and get more weapons or sharpen the weapon that is the brain even more so.
Daniel, I'd be kicking myself if I didn't ask you. I forgot to ask you earlier on. Raspberry Ape, what's the story behind that?
There's a different story every time. Someone's actually in the middle of writing a comic, which is going to be the telltale story of how I really got the name. So when that comic comes out, I'll post it and you'll be able to see it. It's coming out. It's not going to be a long comic. It's going to be a couple of pictures. But the true story is being written soon. So I don't want to spoil that for anyone who's eagerly anticipating that comic coming out.
Okay. It adds more drama to this. And
exactly. It adds more suspense to everything.
Yes.
And everyone's even more wondering why. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to seeing that a little bit in the future. I got you here. I do want to get some advice for some of our newer students. If someone's going to do their first tournament, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. I think everyone who does jiu-jitsu, especially if you're a competitor, all of the guys who are competing for the first time ask you, what advice do you have for me? I'm competing tomorrow for the first time. 100% my advice to everyone, the first thing I say is always the same. Have fun. Go out there and enjoy yourself. That is the number one thing. If you are competing in jiu-jitsu, an absolutely tiny percentage of those people who are competing are professional competitors or very high-level competitors where the outcome of the competition really does mean something to them. Very, very tiny percentage. Less than 1% of the people competing are people who the outcome affects their life in any way. So you kind of need to put it into perspective a little bit. A lot of people get very, very stressed about it. It's a hobby. Go and enjoy yourself. Go and have fun. Don't lose sleep over it. Don't get stressed out of it. It doesn't mean that it's, I'm not trying to belittle people's achievements when they do well in competition, and I'm not trying to say just because you're not a professional grappler means that it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Absolutely not. It's go out and enjoy yourself, because if you don't enjoy doing your hobby, then you're going to start questioning why you're doing it. Kind of to go with that, enjoyment aside, one of the things that the majority of people, and I've learned this especially from my own students, is they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And pressure can be a very useful tool. It's the whole Customato thing, the nerves and the pressure, it's like a fire. With a fire, you can cook with it, or it will burn your house down. So you need to be able to control those nerves and that pressure. And the majority of people end up with that pressure metaphorically burning their house down. And one of the reasons why people get so nervous and they have so much pressure, I always ask them, well, what are you actually nervous about? Well, you're not nervous about getting hurt because you spar hard in the gym 4 days a week, and you know that if you tap out, you'll be fine. So you're not nervous about getting hurt. What are you nervous about? And it's always the same thing. It's about letting down people and disappointing other people, and very rarely is that what you would think it would be. Most people think that they'd be worried about disappointing their family, their friends, or their girlfriend or boyfriend or spouse or whatever. Almost always they are worried about disappointing the coach, and they're worried about disappointing their teammates. And every time I say the same thing, which is, that's ridiculous. It's crazy. No coach is going out there, especially if your first competition. No one, in my opinion, a good coach, calling myself a good coach, but me personally, I would never go out there and be disappointed by someone losing, or be disappointed by someone getting submitted or not winning a tournament. So the first thing I say to all of my students is, if you're nervous about disappointing me or disappointing any of your other instructors or any of your teammates, that's crazy. Stop doing that. And a lot of the time when I say that to them, they go, okay, well, actually, a lot of pressure comes off. And when you take a lot of that pressure off, you can perform much, much better. So that's kind of my the main advice is enjoy yourself and don't put pressure on yourself, especially if it's coming from you being nervous about disappointing your coach or your team. If your team and your coach, if you lose a competition or you lose a fight and your coach is a dick about it, then you probably need to go and see a new coach, in my opinion. I don't think that's how someone should act, especially for if it's your first competition, you're a white belt or something like that, you've never competed before. That's crazy to be annoyed or upset or disappointed with someone for going out there and trying this thing they've never done for the first time. In terms of technical stuff, it's very, very difficult for your first competition to talk about, try and do this, try and do that. Some people have a game plan, some people don't have a game plan. Go and enjoy yourself, treat it like a really tough role in the academy. And I think when you take that nerves and pressure and you try and enjoy it, you just end up doing a lot better. So that's my main advice.
Wow, and that's great advice. Daniel, what frustrated you at the beginning in Jiu-Jitsu, and how did you get past that?
To be honest with you, I was lucky enough to start Jiu-Jitsu as a dumb kid at about 14, 15 years old. So to be honest with you, I didn't really get frustrated about too much stuff. I was lucky, I've been doing Jiu-Jitsu now for almost half of my entire life, and obviously the first half of my life I was kind of a dumb kid and didn't really know what was going on anyway. So I'm very experienced in, not just competing, but the Jiu-Jitsu lifestyle, how training goes. You have good days, you have bad days. The big transition, I guess, that frustrated me the most, and luckily I dealt with it all right, but a lot of people don't, which is when you start Jiu-Jitsu, you have a curve, and you start Jiu-Jitsu as a white belt and you don't know what the hell's going on. You're not even doing Jiu-Jitsu for the first little while. You're just rolling around on the floor getting tapped out by every single person, man, woman and child in the gym. You're just getting beat up by everyone. And then after a while, after 6 months to a year, you start doing actual Jiu-Jitsu. Now once you start doing Jiu-Jitsu, you start getting good at it. There's that one day after a little while, and suddenly you're a white belt, but you're getting to be one of the better white belts. You know what you're doing. You understand all of the positions. It's kind of that moment where it clicks for you. And everyone kind of has it at one point or another, or hopefully they do. And once you get that, you start feeling like you're having pretty good days. And every time you go training, you feel good. And every time you go training, you tap out another guy. You pull off the move from the day, and everything's going well. And then you have one bad day. And you have one bad day and you're really pissed off with yourself. You couldn't get the submission on someone that you submit every round, or you were just a bit slow, or you got tapped out by that guy who never taps you out before. And you have that one bad day and you shrug it off and you come back, and then you have another 6 good months where you don't have any bad days and you have another bad day. Now what happens, or what I found happens, is the better you get at Jiu-Jitsu, the more bad days you have. To the point now where at the height, and I think it comes to you are so aware and you have such a high expectation of yourself that so many smaller variables that are completely out of your control could ruin everything. That's the thing with Jiu-Jitsu. One bad variable, you're a little bit slow today, and the entire game's thrown off. So whereas at blue belt I was getting one bad day every 6 months or so, at black belt I have one good day every 6 months or so. So it switches completely the other way around. And sort of purple belt, brown belt level, when that real transition from having more good days than bad days and vice versa was happening, you're starting to go, what the hell is going on? Why isn't this jiu-jitsu working anymore? Why am I getting so bad? And you're not getting bad. You're getting better. And that's what it seems like when you're not as sharp. You seem like you're stepping back. So that was probably the most frustrating thing. I don't know if other people have that. I always tell that story to my blue belts who come in and they tell me that they've had a bad week, and I go, well, when was the last time you had a bad week? And they go, oh, maybe, I've never had it before, or I had it a year ago when I was a white belt. And I say, well, when the last time I had a good week was? It was about a year ago. And they go, okay, okay, it's not so bad anymore. So I think that's the main thing that people need to understand. You will have bad days. In my opinion, I don't know from other people's experiences, the better you get, the more bad days you're going to have relative to how good you think you are or you are. You just got to take it on the chin, understand that it's part of the journey, and keep on going.
Daniel, let's keep this concept in mind of having more bad days as you get better, and looking at the concept of trying to have fun on your first tournament, no matter what happens to you. And really, just for me, I like to have fun at anything I'm doing in jiu-jitsu or anything in general. What belt was the most fun for you?
I would probably say, I think blue. People always say that blue belt is the most fun, and I think that is true. As you get higher and higher up the grades, I started competing less and less the higher belt I got. This was due to starting to pile up more and more injuries, not having as many, as you get higher, as you get to brown and black belt, especially in places with less jiu-jitsu such as the UK compared to you guys in the States. we'll go to a tournament and maybe there'll be no one in my division at brown belt and no one in my division at black belt or something like that. So you end up competing a little bit less and you have to travel around to get that level of competition that you want to compete at. So because of that, at blue belt, you can compete so often with so many different guys that you can really enjoy yourself. You can try new stuff out. You can, which is something that people need to take advantage of. People who are blue belts and enjoy competing, get out there and compete as much as possible, because in a couple of years you're going to be a brown belt and you're going to suddenly, instead of getting 5 fights a day, you're going to start getting 2 fights a day. And then you get a black belt and you maybe a super heavyweight and you're getting no fights a day or 1 fight a day. So definitely take advantage of that. So blue belt's really good fun. Purple belt was probably one of the most fun. I guess they're all fun in very different ways.
Yeah.
Purple belt is really good fun because you're starting. It's at that point that I was starting to beat some good guys, going in the competitions. I competed in a tournament called the Submission 1000, which was a sub-only tournament, but very early on when there wasn't. Obviously, there are so many sub-only tournaments these days, but this was a sub-only tournament. Well, not sub-only. It was there was no points. It was in a cage. It was you compete for 10 minutes, and then you judges decide who was more aggressive on the submissions. And it was a 8-man tournament. Winner takes all, £1,000. It was about $1,500. And back in those days, this was very, very rare, not just for the UK, but for anywhere in the world. So I went into this tournament as a very small purple belt, and there were some awesome competitors. To begin with, I'm looking at this division, I'm going, okay, there's some really, really tough fights here. And then over a couple of weeks before the tournament, the lower grades were being pulled out and bigger names from the UK were being put in, to the point where there was just, I for the first time ever, I thought that there's no way I could win this competition. And I went to this competition after a while. I went there and convinced myself and got into the right mindset that I can do this. Go out there and as a purple belt competed against. First time I'd ever competed against a black belt. I managed to submit the black belt, and I'm like, oh shit, maybe I can actually do this. Went and fought a guy in the second round, beat him, and then got to the final and won the final. And that was by far the most rewarding. It was the most rewarding victory I've ever had, even to this day. Even though it was a really insignificant victory compared to some of the bigger tournaments that I've done now. And a lot of people just forget about that. It was a long time ago. It wasn't super significant or anything like that. But because I was so, as a purple belt, competing against elite guys of black, brown, and black belts, you just, there's no expectation. So it takes, when I was saying this pressure that you get put on yourself. Well, when you're a purple belt competing against black belts, there is no pressure. You can go out there and you can enjoy yourself. By the time you get to black belt and you've won some stuff, every tournament that I go into now, there's a lot of eyes on you, and there's a lot of eyes expecting you to do really well and to win. So as you get through, you get much more opportunity to compete on big tournaments and really have a great time. Stuff like Polaris, my match with AJ, I had the best time that I've had in any fight, but there is a lot of pressure on there. Whereas this sub 1000 tournament, I came in, I had absolutely no pressure. I did better than I ever thought I would. So that was probably the most fun I've ever. That was the most rewarding tournament I've ever won by far. And I don't think that anything I could do in the future, short of winning ADCC or Nogi Worlds or something like that. And even then, I think it would be close. That was a really, really, really cool tournament that I won.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. Very motivating, and to hear that tournament you won way back then is still held dear to your heart. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big time.
Do you have any advice for somebody who's busy and maybe get in 1 or 2 times a week?
What, training jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. What could they do to get better as they're able to only get in a couple times a week?
I think when you get down to that, really the minimal numbers, I think that one time a week jiu-jitsu, it's very, very difficult to progress on that. So if you've been doing jiu-jitsu for a couple of years and suddenly, you've had a kid or work's got you working somewhere else and you can only make jiu-jitsu once a week instead of the usual 2 or 3 times a week that you go, I think that that's okay for a short couple of months, amount of time, and that will keep you maintaining where you are. But if you came into jiu-jitsu as a brand new beginner and you were trying to train once a week, you're really going to struggle to progress. You're really going to struggle to develop. You're going to miss out on a lot of things, and you're going to have a lot of people starting after you and progressing much faster because they're training 3 or 4 times a week. So one, I think, is very difficult if it's for any other reason other than a temporary thing, a temporary issue. 2 times a week is the minimum I think that you need to do to progress. And if you can only do twice a week, I don't think that's a problem. I absolutely do think you can progress with that. If you can only do 2 times a week, try and be as smart as possible and efficient as possible with your time. If you have 5 hours a day to train jiu-jitsu 5 days a week, and lots of people do, you can come in, you roll, you switch off, you have fun, you don't worry about anything, you don't think too much about the technique because you're spending hours on the mat 5-6 days a week, you're going to pick it up. Now, if you're spending, an hour or 2 a week, split over 1 or 2 sessions, you need to start being very, very efficient with your time and really thinking about what you're doing. So come in, really try and focus when the technique's being taught. And one thing that I try and do, and more importantly, one thing that I really try and put onto my students, which is try and analyze, if you can, try and analyze why you're doing what you're doing. I think that one of the ways that a lot of people unfortunately teach jiu-jitsu, and I think that it's not the most efficient way of teaching or kind of giving the knowledge to another person, is they show the technique. This is the difference between showing and teaching a technique or a principle, which is you should try and, I think a good coach or a good instructor would explain not how to do an armbar, but why this is how you do an armbar. And if your instructor doesn't teach you that, then it's kind of on you to try and work out. And the more you do jiu-jitsu, the better you're going to get at analyzing and breaking it down, because it's just, when you start off, it's a language that you just don't speak. So you need to get a little fluent in that language before you can start really analyzing it. But if you go in there with that sort of attitude to be, you can't have the most mat hours on the mat, so try and be the smartest guy there, try and think the most there, and then when you go home, try and write stuff down is really good. I think that writing techniques down is really, really useful, not just so you remember what you did, but immediately afterwards, however you write it down, that's going to be when you're kind of twisting all of the cogs and all of the triggers in your brain and switching on, and what did I do? Oh yeah, I did this. You're reinforcing all of those neuro pathways about what you've just learned. So a lot of people learn a technique, they go home, forget about it, come back the next day, do it again, jogs their memory. If they keep on coming back every day, that's fine. But if you're not going to come back for another week, you've got to jog your memory another way, write it down, look at it, visualize it. This comes back to the whole mind thing. I do this quite a lot, especially when I'm preparing for competition. I will lie in bed or sit down in a comfy chair, close my eyes and visualize myself doing a technique over and over and over and over again. Visualization is a hugely powerful tool, both for preparation and also even doing stuff like drilling. There's been studies out there where they've got, I talk about this on one of my, on the mental training episode that I did on my podcast. There was a study out there where they had 3 control groups. One group was lifting weights, one group wasn't doing anything, and the other group was going through a guided meditation where they were visualizing lifting weights. And the results for the group that lifted weights were as you expect, they got stronger. For the group that did nothing as you expect, that nothing happened. But the interesting one was the group that were visualizing it. They did not get anywhere near as strong as the people who were doing weights, but they made a noticeable enough difference to be clinically conclusive to the group that was doing nothing. So actually visualizing stuff, your body isn't, especially if you can be really vivid in your visualization. When you visualize, don't just imagine 2 stick figures doing an arm bar. Imagine the feel of the gi material in your arm. Imagine your fingers feeling sore when you grab onto the lapel. Imagine how bright the light is, how it smells, You're having a hard roll, you're trying to visualize in a hard roll. The guy's sweating, it smells, the floor, is a certain texture, the sound is a certain way. When you make it really vivid, your body starts to struggle to differentiate between, is this person doing this or is this person just really thinking hard about it? And by almost tricking your nervous system into thinking you're doing it, you're actually getting reps and reps and reps and reps in without moving your body at all. It means you can do it without another individual to practice on, and it means that you can do it, on a train, on a plane, for 10 minutes in bed before in bed before you go to sleep. So these are the sort of intelligent strategies that you can use to try and improve yourself off of the mat.
Fascinating stuff, and I'm so glad you have your own podcast where we could listen to this on a regular basis. It's amazing that how, you said visualize yourself doing an armbar. I can picture myself doing an armbar, but really almost trick your brain into like, you are doing an armbar right now, brain, and this is how it feels and smells and the texture and the and if it's slippery or whatever, everything. Really get the brain engaged on that. That's amazing to hear. Do you have a favorite?
Absolutely. I think the visualization thing, I think visualization might actually be a really bad word to call this thing that you're doing. Because a visualization implies that it's just visual. Yeah. But then you're only, the way that we see the world is through, very many senses, more than just the five. We have lots of the main five senses. You're seeing things, you're feeling things, you're smelling things, you're hearing things. That is your sensory input. Now if you just cut off all of, it was muted and there was no smell and there was no sound and there was no touch and you were just viewing something, you are practicing that thing with only one of your sensory inputs. Yes, it's a really important one, but it is just one of your many sensory inputs. When you start to almost, it doesn't sound right when you say it, but it's more imagining stuff, mentally rehearsing things is almost a better way than visualization, because you want to try and use all of your senses to make it as real as possible. When I do my visualization for the tournament atmosphere is very, very different from what you'll ever experience when you step on the mat. Anyone who competes will know when you step on the tournament mat, your hearing goes a little bit because of the adrenaline, and you almost have that. It's very, very background, all of the sounds. So they're coming from all different angles. It's very, very unique, that sound that you get. And then the mat, the way that I feel it is when I'm competing, you've got all of this stuff in the background, and then you've got you and your opponent and the floor very, very central and very focused. It's almost like you're surrounded in a bubble, and all of the stuff inside of that bubble, which is you, the grips that you're taking, your opponent's grips, and the floor that you're sitting on is very like hyper sensitive, really, really real, and everything else is kind of really far in the background. And this is something that you can't replicate anywhere. You can't practice that. You can't get that feeling, and you can't get used to that thing in the gym or anywhere else. So by visualizing it, you can get as good as you can without competing, put yourself in that situation. So when you step on the mat, you go, well, I've only competed in one real life tournament, but I've competed for thousands of matches or 100 matches or however, hours and hours of time visualizing this stuff. So when you step on the mat, you're almost more experienced in competing than you actually are.
Well, it sounds like when you have like a real vivid dream and you wake up and you can't figure out if it's real or not, versus maybe when you tell somebody about that dream and they're like, oh, that's okay. You can't, like, everything is so real. Everything, like you mentioned, all your senses are engaged and really hitting all cylinders there. And it's just getting that compared to just like you say, visualization doesn't do it justice, but that's the common word we use, I guess, to describe it. So
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, dreaming is like a great example of how powerful the mind is. You can be sweating, you can increase your heart rate without ever moving, without ever doing physical activity, without being in a hot room. Your body can trigger all of these physiological reactions to something that isn't actually happening. That kind of just goes to show how powerful the mind is. You can, imagine that we could control our subconscious mind as well as the random stuff or whatever. We know so little about dreams. This is what I was talking about earlier about how little we understand about how the mind works. We know so little about dreams. Imagine if we could bring on those sort of how vivid and how powerful your dreams are. Imagine if we could do that consciously. And there is some stuff, I know that you can do some stuff similar to that, which is called lucid dreaming, which is something that is a completely different subject. I don't have any experience. That's something that I want to look at. It's something I'm interested in, but I haven't at the moment. But if you can, you can increase your heart rate in a dream. Imagine if you could increase your heart rate subconsciously but consciously without ever moving. You could do cardio, you could do weights, you could train and do other stuff without ever moving. That is the power. It's something that we have no idea how to control that, but your mind has the ability to create those physiological real life outside of that dream world reactions. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Wow. This is getting deeper than I anticipated, but it's very interesting.
We'll move on to something else.
Daniel, I've had a great time talking with you today. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Not much, to be honest. I guess the same thing that everyone says when they're talking to jiu-jitsu people, especially people who are kind of not been training for long. Just keep training, be consistent with it. The worst thing that you can do for your jiu-jitsu is to stop doing it. It's pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised the number of people that I've seen who have quit jiu-jitsu for a while and then come back to it, and it's very, very difficult to come back to jiu-jitsu because you not only have you lost so much of what you had, but also all of those people that you had a lot more than now have a lot more than you do. So the people whose ass you were kicking are now kicking your ass. So it's very, very difficult to get back in the jiu-jitsu if you quit. So basically the answer to that is very simple. Don't quit, even if it's hard to train all the time. If you're passionate about jiu-jitsu, then, we're talking about earlier, once a week is fine to keep it. Just keep your foot in that pool, so to speak, and don't lose it. Keep training. Everyone will be a black belt as long as they keep training. So there's not that many black belts compared to everyone else, which goes to show how many people don't continue training. And yeah, just keep on doing it and enjoy yourself is the most important. Remember that it's a hobby, have fun, and just keep doing jiu-jitsu, I guess.
All right. Well, thank you, Daniel Strauss. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
We'd like to thank Daniel for taking the time out to drop some knowledge to us and our listeners, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was great talking with him. Check out his podcast. We'll put links to it in the show notes. You're probably a podcast listener by this point. If you enjoyed the conversation,
definitely check his podcast out too.
Yeah, if you enjoyed the conversation, there's more of that, minus me, which is perfectly okay, over at the Raspberry Ape. So check that out.
There we go. We're now going to have no listeners, Byron.
Dang it, they're all going to migrate over there. This was
now you're calling them a bunch of wildebeest and they're going to migrate?
This was a huge mistake, Harry.
Yeah, I see how you are.
Oh, well, we got to get shut down somehow.
Yeah, definitely.
But if by some chance we don't get things shut down over here, we'll have another interview next week, my friends.
One a week. We've had one every single week, which is pretty impressive.
Yep.
Definitely, I know you're listening to the podcast, but check us out on YouTube. That's where Byron does his question and answers. Actually, also has puts our podcast there. Check us out on Twitter. We're on Facebook, Reddit, and I think that's it. Are we anywhere else, Byron?
Oh, we're all over the major. We're not in the Pokemon Go game.
Yeah,
Dang
and
it,
we're actually right now looking to get on CBS. So that's in the talks now. So hopefully we'll be there within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, all the other major news networks have fallen through, but CBS is still a maybe.
We're still in talks with them.
Yeah, still negotiating that hard deal. But next week, Gary.
It's positive.
Yeah, definitely we're going to get it. Next week we have Sean Kitzman. He's going to be talking about keeping your body in good condition and good shape, helping you get past those things we all get in jiu-jitsu, bumps and bruises, sprains, and problem with your back, problem with my back, that sort of thing. Help keeping you mat ready. Help keeping you for if you're going to train today. And also you want to train again this week. Like some people, it's actually kind of tough to train 2 days in a row or whatever. Just helping you stay healthy enough to keep training and keep rolling, having a good time. So that'll be next week. A whole lot of good information from him. and very helpful information. So he's also a friend of Ken Blackburn, so we talk about him a little bit too. Great interview altogether. So really excited to bring you guys that next week.
Yeah, Evan Byron is talking about Matt Ready there. But I think this week we also have an episode of Matt Tales.
Oh, we do, Gary. Should we go ahead and roll that right about now?
Let's roll our new Matt Tale episode.
This is Matt Tales. We bring you amazing Jiu-Jitsu stories. The story might be funny, unfortunate. It could be about an epic fail or an epic win. So sit back, my friend, relax, dry off your sweat from rolling, and enjoy Matt Tales. It was my first tournament, and I was a nervous white belt. I had a game plan. I was going to pull guard and work my 2 favorite sweeps. Once I got to top position, I was confident in my armbar, and if I missed it, I would work on my sweeps again. Well, as tournaments go, my coach was busy coaching a teammate of mine when my name was called. I quickly found a friend, a purple belt, to coach me. And this was great news because he actually knew my game plan. I handed him my camera and asked him to record my matches. I was hoping for some cool footage. And if I lost, at least I would be able to go back and see where things went wrong. The match started with me pulling guard. I soon hit a sit-up sweep and landed in mount, and finished fairly quickly. I was even calm enough to hear my friend's voice as he was coaching me. My second match was a back and forth battle with several wild scrambles, and in the final seconds of the match, I took my friend's technical advice and was able to pass the guard for a 1-point victory. I had made it to the finals. I had surprised myself slightly, but I was excited to compete. I pulled guard, but unfortunately my opponent was able to pass my guard with a very slick pass. I was unable to regain my guard, and I fell victim to a tight gi choke. Well, sometimes you win, and sometimes you learn. When I got home, I was excited to watch my matches and try to gain some insight about my performance. I eagerly played my first match. This was going to be a fun one to watch. Nothing like enjoying my game plan executed in a beautiful fashion. I hit play and watch as I pulled guard. I started to work my sweep. Okay, I was not as smooth as I remember. I guess the camera adds about 10 pounds and maybe takes a few smoothness points away. As I started to hit my sweep, my coach begins to yell advice at me. This was great to hear the advice from the cameraman, but the camera ended up facing the ground. The ground was all I saw for the duration of this match. No amazing footage of my submission or my sweep to share with my friend, family, or girlfriend. No real evidence that this match ended this way at all. Well, I moved on from that terrible video and hit play on my second match. My second match started with the camera already pointed at the mat because my coach was frantically yelling advice to me. It was about 2 minutes of mostly looking at the floor. Then he set the camera down. The camera was not going to be pointed at my match. Instead of my match, I have some wonderful footage of legs of a table. I was unable to find any footage of my last match. Well, every cloud has a silver lining, and I always try to find one. The thing I enjoyed most about my tournament experience was when my coach requested to see my matches because he had missed all of them. I gladly showed him the footage. He was unable to find any flaws in any of my matches because the footage was so poor. And the good news, my friends, the very next week, I received my blue belt. This has been Matt Tales. Some of the names and places may have changed. We may have, in fact, taken some creative liberties with the story. In order to keep Matt Tales going, we need more tales. Tales from listeners like you. send your mat tales to bjjbrick@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing your amazing stories. All right, that was, I think that's part 3 or episode 3 of our Mat Tales. I'm going to call that one Bad Camera Work. That would be very disappointing, Gary. Get home and see that.
Yeah, but the good thing is he did win 2 out of his 3 matches, medaled. It's a lot better than the guy last week. Or even the person the first week who got locked in the bathroom.
Yep. You always look on the bright side. He was able to actually come off with a couple of the W's. No cool footage, but that's just extra.
Yeah.
You're not training to get great footage. You're training to get better at jiu-jitsu. You're competing to not get good footage. You're competing to help your game in the long term and just give you that excitement and maybe put you under a little bit of stress. But
because really, would you rather have your coach doing a better job videotaping, or would you rather have your coach really giving you some good information?
That's true. And the coach gave him some advice that actually helped him win the match. So that's a big deal. And he can
hear the advice. He just can't see the match, and he can see legs.
Yeah, he didn't say how great the advice. Listening to the advice again. That he go back, my friend. Listen to those videos and really just take them in. That way,
think of it as a podcast.
There you go, a podcast that was not intended to be audio only, and there we go. That's a great way to turn this around. If you have a crazy story, good or bad or jiu-jitsu related, type it up, send it to us. If you're not even into that, send me an email at bjjbrick@gmail.com. I'll get a hold of you and we'll get your story figured out and put into a similar fashion like this and shared with the community. And people are enjoying the stories. People aren't really enjoying typing them up and sharing them as much. So we're definitely looking for some new stories to have.
Yeah, so definitely send us to them, bjjbrick@gmail.com, and we'll get it on the show.
Yep. To help make us produce the best possible show that we can. We're wanting to do things in the future that are more than what we're doing now. We mentioned that we're in the Google Play Music Store, but we're not in the Google Play Store, which is where they have apps. It'd be nice to have an app someday, Gary, that people could download this and find our show through the app. But that costs more money than we're able to put towards the show. It'd be nice to be able to go travel to an event someday, Gary, and do some coverage of some things. But yet again, that costs a bunch of money, and we're really just kind of keeping this brick floating on the water. So if you want to help us out, support us, go to the link on the show notes. There's a video of me explaining our Patreon page and how you can support us there. We ask for a donation per episode. $3 has been the biggest hit. If you give us $3 per episode, first off, you get a huge thank you. That's amazing to us that there are people, and there are a few people out there that are helping us at the $3 level. And we'll also send you out a 5-inch BJJ Brick gi patch that you can put on your gi. You're not really buying it for that. It's just a token of our appreciation and for your support. So it means a ton to us. And really, Gary, we have a goal on the Patreon page that's pretty intense for me.
Yeah, so definitely check out that goal, because I think most people would really love to see the end result.
Well, let's go ahead and let's just share them with this goal. At the Patreon's going a little bit slow, to be honest, Gary. So I'm not really. When I first put this up there, I was like, this could be happening I don't have no idea when. I don't think this is going to happen this year. That's quite all right. We appreciate the support we get. We're just we're gonna. The Patreon is going to help us expand things and do things at a higher level, but it's all extra, and it's all like a really good pat on the back, and it means a lot to us. But I don't think we'll get this goal by the end of the year, so I'm able to relax a little bit, because once we reach our goal, I'm going to get pepper sprayed, and people are going to grapple me, and we'll see how poorly I do, and see what the effects are when you pepper spray a black belt and you unleash a series of other grapplers on him. And see how it affects me, and I know it's going to affect me because it's going to suck. So
it's going to suck bad.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, and I got Gary committed.
Even for the guys grappling with you.
Yeah, I got Gary committed to do this. I'm confident I can get a couple of a white belt, a blue belt. A couple of them seem interested in it. I got to definitely see about getting a couple more people. I think I've got some mats. I know Gary's the mat king anyway. We'll throw them outside maybe. Film it outside, and then we'll, of course, the beauty of this is that we would record it as a video, not just audio. That would be great audio, though. And then put it on our YouTube channel, and you could watch me get taken apart right on the face, you know.
And we were also thinking of right when it's over, you know, what Byron still can't see.
Yeah.
Throwing a bee's nest on him. So we've thought about that. It hasn't been approved yet by the FDA.
Yeah, I don't think that will get approved by the FDA. I don't know if I could even tell the difference between the intense pain I already have to the bee's nesting.
Actually, the bees might not even come around because of the pepper spray.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That might
so
work
I guess
to my
we'll
advantage.
just have to tase you.
Gary. This is sounding tough. Although I have heard the taser, once it's over, you're basically fine. You can keep fighting. The pepper spray, it takes you out of the fight.
So you want us to do both. Okay, cool.
After maybe this goal, Gary gets tased, and we'll see how we'll do this. Gary will be grappling. He'll get tased, and then we keep grappling, and we'll see what happens to Gary as he continues to get tased, as he loses positions and probably cannot tap.
Well, I'll probably be tapping. My arm will be moving.
Man. So maybe that's the next level. But Gary, to be honest, I'm not as worried about this Patreon thing, the pepper spray thing. It's off in the future. That future, Byron. I'm not worried about that.
You got some time to train for it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to start back on the hot
spray
peppers.
Yourself with a small spray, 3 times a week, and work your way up to it.
Get back on that
like
hot
they say,
Thai
like,
food.
If you get bit by a rattlesnake enough times, you kind of get immune to the venom. You develop immunity to the venom. So I bet if you sprayed yourself enough with pepper spray, you could get immune to it.
The best I'm going to do is hot Thai food. I like Penang curry, green curry, yellow curry, whatever. Make it. I need to get back up there to where it's really hot.
Do you like Steph Curry?
I haven't tried that one.
I was wondering if he's your favorite basketball player.
Oh, basketballs,
Since you are a
yeah.
Curry guy.
Yeah.
So Byron's favorite basketball player, you heard it here first, is Steph Curry.
Yeah. That's true, Gary. A little bit of potatoes. Potatoes, some Thai peppers and that sort of thing. All kinds.
Do you put any tomatoes in there?
No tomatoes. Okay, we
went way off track.
Our big curry discussion. Maybe next week, Gary, we'll have another session of Gary's audiobook. That way, he could be the one off track.
Or we can do Mad Tales. So definitely send in a Mad Tale so we can skip it. But hey, on a serious side, since you guys are all listening to this podcast, means you definitely listen to podcasts. You like Jiu-Jitsu, or you just log onto the show to see Byron and I's pretty faces, which I don't think is the reason why. But definitely tell your friends about this podcast. The best type of marketing, best thing that it's awesome when one of our listeners tells their friends, and we hear somebody say, hey, my buddy Johnny told me to listen. And so if you enjoy our show, tell your friends, and hopefully they'll enjoy it there also.
Absolutely. And the home of the BJJ Break podcast is in Wichita, Kansas. If you're traveling through the town here, or you happen to be in Wichita, you want to train with us, let us know. Send us an email. Send us that message on Facebook. Get a hold of us. There's many ways. And we'll try our best to arrange a time to get some mat time with you and have a good time. It's been a good summer. Had some people coming in town. And that was great, Gary. So hopefully continue this trend into the fall and get some more listeners and get to meet more people. So
and
looking
if
forward to
Denise
that.
is listening, hey, thank you. She's been in town for the last month and a half from Germany training with us, and we learned a lot. And she's actually getting ready to leave, but we appreciate the time on the mat, and we learned a lot from you.
Yep, and appreciate her side control pressure.
That side control pressure is brutal.
Absolutely. So that was a good time. And as always, my friends, stay sweaty.
And don't forget to shower.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.